Hello and welcome to the Americano show. Today we are going to be talking about Elon Musk and Donald Trump. The two men, the two very rich men, had a discussion last night on X, formerly known as Twitter, and it was very widely viewed, according to Elon Musk, who may be exaggerating slightly. It's had over 1 billion engagements.
This is really aimed at open-minded, independent voters who just try to make up their mind. And so you can understand what is it just like to have a conversation. Honored to Donald, great to speak. We had a great conversation yesterday. As you mentioned yesterday, if we could just record that conversation and post it, it would have been excellent. I hope we can have something like that today.
I think we will. I'm pretty sure we will. And congratulations, because I see you broke every record in the book with so many millions of people. And it's an honor. We view that as an honor. And then you do want silencing of certain voices. Usually those are voices that have something to say that are constructive, oftentimes constructive. And so we have to consider it an honor. But congratulations on breaking every record in the book tonight.
I am delighted to be joined to discuss this subject by two stars of Substack. Ed West, who is here in the Spectator's office, who is author of The Wrong Side of History Substack, which is a very successful Substack, which I encourage all Americano listeners to subscribe to. Viewers, I should say, not just listeners. And Richard Hanania, who also has a very successful Substack, which you should all read, which is called Richard Hanania's Substack. And he is also, I should say, president of the Center for the Study of Partisanship and Ideology, CSPI. Richard, I'll start with you. I thought I'd read out the statement that the Harris campaign put out about Trump's interview with Musk. They said, Donald Trump's extremism and dangerous Project 2025 agenda is a feature, not a glitch, of his campaign, which was on full display for those unlucky enough to listen in tonight during whatever that was on X.com. Trump's entire campaign is in service of people like Elon Musk and himself, self-obsessed rich guys who will sell out the middle class and who cannot run a live stream in the year 2024. Do you think quite a lot of people agree with the Harris assessment?
I think that a lot of people will agree with the Harris assessment. But I think the sort of marriage between the Trump campaign and tech is, on balance, a good thing for them. People like tech entrepreneurs. You wouldn't know it from the sort of intelligentsia and how they speak, but if you look at polling as approval ratings for Amazon, Google, these big tech companies, they're overwhelmingly positive, much more positive than most departments of the federal government and most politicians. A lot of intellectuals don't like them. And it's not true that, of course, that all these tech giants are in favor of Trump. A lot of them, of course, most of them are for the Democrats this year, like they are in most years. But the idea that there is some kind of sort of kind of young seeming dynamic, elite human capital kind of portion of society that is pro Trump, that is on his side, reminding people of that, I think is good. And I think that's what it does for Trump here. I mean, the idea that the message of the Harris campaign, it's got that tone of, whatever that was, this kind of sort of snarky online tone. I think it generally works. I mean, people do talk like that. I mean, there is an aesthetic style where, it's sort of appropriate for the time. It doesn't go too far. It's not, in recent years, Democrats have had a problem with sort of wokeness and messaging, and there hasn't really been much of that, but they've kept sort of the snarkiness. These people are weird. There's something wrong with them. I think that's pretty much the right balance. But, on net, I think you talk to Elon Musk, you get that many listeners. Trump didn't go crazy. He didn't really go off course. He hit the things that he wanted to hit: immigration, inflation, the economy. Overall, a good night for him.
There was quite a lot of the snark was directed towards the quality of the interview, if it was indeed an interview and not just a Twitter X space. And a lot of that seems to be journalistic jealousy, perhaps, or journalistic resentment that Elon Musk has such a big platform. But there's also a fair point, I think, to be made, which is it's an odd situation where you have a backer of Donald Trump, someone who is going to give millions to the Trump campaign, interviewing Trump, praising Trump a lot, getting praised by Trump a lot at the same time. It's not sort of conventional media coverage of an election, is it?
No, it's not. And, conservatives used to complain about social media censorship and these platforms are biased. I mean, Jack Dorsey wasn't going and, giving interviews to Hillary Clinton and saying everyone should go vote for her. So, I mean, it is sort of a different level of bias, but you're right. I don't know if people care at this point. I think people just sort of see every media outlet and every social media company as on one side or the other. But you're right. If you believe in neutral institutions and the free marketplace of ideas and those kind of ideals, then yeah, this definitely violates that.
And another thing I'd like to put to you, Richard, and then to Ed, is that I thought that Trump was more boring than usual listening to that interview last night. And it ties into my theory that if only everyone had treated him nicely from the beginning, he probably would not be the political phenomenon that he is now. Because he just repeats himself a lot. He didn't really reveal much. He was very braggadocious, but we expect that. Is it the case that Trump thrives off the hostility towards him? He's not so appealing when people seem to like him.
I don't know. I mean, and boring might be good for Trump. I mean, when that event he did with the Black Journalists Association, that certainly wasn't boring. I mean, there was a lot that was exciting and funny there. I mean, he was told them, Kamala Harris has never been black. He told them, you're very rude to me. You ask terrible questions. I don't know if that, that certainly helps him with Republicans, whether that's broadly appealing. I mean, that's, how he consolidated the Republican base. I mean, these people just don't like journalists and want to hear people yell at them and criticize them. Is that good for the general public? I don't think so. I think probably boring. I mean, I think the Tim Walz pick is boring. You don't want to be boring in the way Biden is boring, just sort of senile and sort of a horror show and everyone's watching to see, what's going to happen next. But, you can't electrify a room. But I think Trump, he's got to run a boring campaign. He's not going to, he's not going to unite the country. He's not going to be like an Obama phenomenon and get like 60% of the country behind him. The opinions of Donald Trump are pretty much baked in. He's nothing he's going to do the next few months is going to make people like him all that much more. Even the assassination attempt ticked his poll numbers a little bit. What he can do is turn the attention towards Kamala, make her seem unacceptable, remind people of why they don't like Democrats, remind people there's a lot of nostalgia for the Trump presidency as far as economics and how people's living standards compared to what happened later under Biden. So I think those are the points he needs to hit. And in that case, boring is probably not the worst strategy.
Ed, what do you think about my Trump being boring, bad for him point? I mean, I can't really make too much out of it because, over the last 8 years, I've talked a lot about him, so I can't pretend that I find him boring because he's obviously not. He's fascinating.
Yeah. He's the most entertaining
hilarious
politician in the world, and that's his strength.
So he
is. I mean, he's not a nice guy, but he is very funny.
Yes, you've never been bored by him.
No, I do wonder maybe if he's getting on a little bit, isn't he? Maybe the golden age is over.
Well, there was a lot of talk about that last night, that, his voice sounded a bit slurred and the sort of attempt to talk about him in the way that people...
Yeah. As soon as obviously Biden dropped out, people immediately start talking about the age because, everything's partisanship, right?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you about Musk because obviously Musk in Britain has been in the news a lot because of the riots, and he's sort of now widely portrayed by the BBC and so on as an instigator of these riots.
People have called for him to be extradited.
Yeah.
Charged in Britain.
Charged.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, he was sharing quite out there stuff.
Yeah. I mean, he's shared a tweet by, the leader of Britain First, which is, way out there in terms of extremism.
Yes.
He often replied to some very, very wacky. I mean, being used to Twitter over all these years, I'm quite guarded and think, well, I must be like on the fringes of respectability. And say no one will ever, no one important will ever like tweet me. And then he replies to these complete like crazy nut jobs, who are coming out all the kind of mad stuff. I have to say, this week has made me think that maybe 1776 wasn't a mistake. Maybe Jefferson wasn't the traitor and renegade. And there is something to be said about American kind of free speech rules, especially the First Amendment. I mean, I've written about this before, and I think maybe if this embarrasses Britain, I think it's a good thing. If more Americans are aware of how many people go to jail in Britain or are arrested or bothered by the police just for making comments. I mean, during this week, there have been these immediate trials very quickly done. some of the cases have been arguably, yes, conviction. They've arguably called for rioting. Some people have just been posting racism online and they've gone to jail for it. And that is not unusual. People have gone to jail for private WhatsApp messages. People have gone to jail even for staying, or they've been arrested or bothered by the police due for saying stuff like, trans women aren't women or something.
Yeah.
And this happens repeatedly. And so there is this kind of complacency amongst members of the British establishment that, actually, Britain is fine and all these silly Americans don't understand it. But we do have a problem. And he's got a point.
I mean, Mark Stein goes a bit far when he says that in modern Britain, the only thing that isn't prosecuted is crime. But the gist of his point,
I mean, I've repeatedly mentioned about the inadequate sentences given out to people who commit violent crimes, often allowed to repeatedly given spend sentences, and it completely contrasts with the amount of effort they put into clamping down on free speech. I mean, I wouldn't be as much as free speech is not an absolute thing. There are shades of it, and there are some things, some people will be absolutist about it. Although I don't think no one's a real absolutist about giving away war secrets or inciting someone to be murdered. But some people are more forthright than others. Yeah. But we have not got the balance right, and he's right about that. Even though some of his stuff is a bit cringy on Twitter, but that's not a crime.
Yeah. Yeah. Richard, I thought I'd ask you about this. I mean, this is supposed to be the Americano podcast, but I thought your perspective as an American, I've seen you've been posting a bit about it. What's your view of the riots in Britain, and the reaction to it, and particularly the kind of the talk about the suppression of free speech, the attempt to clamp down on misinformation, on incendiary rhetoric, on hateful rhetoric online?
Yeah, from an American perspective, I mean, there's a lot that's just unusual here. I mean, you guys have had a conservative government for close to 2 decades now, right? I mean, the fact that people are still getting knocked on the door and saying you're misgendering and this and that, you sort of wonder, I can understand. The conservatives seemed a little bit nihilistic to me in the last election. A lot of them were saying, oh, just let Labor win. But given that conservatives have been in power that long and the free speech situation is that bad, it really helped me sort of understand why conservatives would actually be frustrated. Although some people tell me they've done some good things on the university free speech. And one of the things I mentioned online, I mean, I think it's very interesting. They never go for the highbrow racists. I mean, there are people who write about race and IQ and so forth. They never arrest them. It does seem kind of like a class war kind of thing. And so, yeah, I mean, these tensions, I think that another thing that Musk does that I think that a lot of the censors don't like, I think they think it's hyperbolic. I mean, he talks about, civil war is inevitable in the UK, that kind of talk doesn't strike me as measured in its sort of forecasting of what's going to happen here. But it's an unusual case. I mean, frankly, seeing white people loot stores, I mean, in the US, this would be just a very sort of weird thing. I can't remember any kind of photo like that, or like an anti-immigration or like an anti-minority thing that actually turns violent. I mean, that is very unusual from American perspective. We have sort of a color of crime that's a kind of understanding of what crime is, what urban disorders are. It's usually, the lower lower socioeconomic demographic, usually, targeting stores in their own neighborhoods, sometimes going outside of them, but a reaction to urban crime or a reaction towards immigration. It's very unusual. Yeah, the European situation is different.
And there's quite a lot of people on Twitter again saying they're going to quit the platform because it's become such a sort of hotbed of right-wing opinion. And as Ed has written in a piece for the Spectator, Twitter was for a long time the sort of vanguard of enforcing progressive opinion as a social media entity. It's a very powerful social media entity. And now it's the outlier among the big social media groups, social media platforms, I should say, in being somewhere that seems to be going in the opposite direction. What do you make of all that?
Yeah, I mean, there was these articles in the last few years that finally conservative boycotts started working. So Target, for example, would have LGBT month. They would, have all these LGBT stuff in the front of the store. People started boycotting them. They basically announced that they were going to tone it down from now on. There's been a lot of companies getting rid of their DEI or scaling it back. And, the media is just well, why is this happening? Part of it might be the Supreme Court affirmative action case. I don't think it's that that much as far as corporate America. It doesn't apply that directly to it. The simplest answer of what happened is just Elon Musk bought Twitter, and it's not like the conservative mobs have taken over because it's only one platform. We've got something, I think, a little bit more of a sort of Madisonian checks and balances, where Twitter is the most important platform. It's in the hands of somebody who's right leaning. All the other platforms are sort of left leaning, and it seems like I don't think people can exaggerate how important this is. I mean, Twitter was, it's like you had to work to cancel somebody beforehand. You'd have to find their emails. You'd have to organize people. You'd have to say, let's all get together, either show up in person or email, and like nobody else would see it except the person who got the email. Now it's like something with Twitter, something would come in the news. You'd have, hundreds of thousands or, sometimes millions of views, really just this mob behavior. You'd get DMs. Everyone else would see it. There's sort of this collective knowledge thing where like everyone could see that everyone is being, is mobbing on someone. It's not just that they're being mobbed. And I don't think it was a coincidence that the Great Awakening really took off when Twitter took off. I mean, the timing matches up. It's the early 2010s. Twitter takes off as something we use, and then you go look at those graphs and when they're talking about intersectionality and critical race theory and trans rights and all this other stuff in the media. These numbers just go up like this around 2010, 2011. And so sometimes it's not. It's sort of a very seems like a simplistic explanation to say it was this one app, and then this guy bought the app and then changed it, and then our society changed. But I think a story that's close to that is pretty much correct.
Well, presumably you'd agree with that, because in your piece you said that Musk does sort of qualify as a great man of history.
Yeah, it's a great man. Yeah. One man can change the world in that way. I mean, the most important thing he's done is probably community notes, and I think all this stuff about misinformation, and now the British government wants to have these kind of misinformation courses and ban misinformation. But the whole BLM thing was misinformation. The whole idea was spread by, firstly, false reports about incidents involving police, the hands up, don't shoot thing, which was spread. And also lots of individual stories going around, which community notes sort of stopped it. And I've seen since community notes started, people say, oh, look at this conversation, this poor man's unarmed, he's attacked the police. And underneath, actually, the fact that he had a gun, he was a wanted felon, he pointed the gun. And literally, the BLM thing wouldn't have happened in the same way if it wasn't for Twitter spreading it that way.
And I mean, I could see that the impact that it has, and it's important. But do you not think that let's take the riots that we were just talking about, I mean, the reaction against it is so strong within the platform itself and outside it, that, I mean, it hasn't, it's not really a successful enforcer of conservative opinion.
No, I think the riots are instinctively repulsive to most people. They're overwhelming majority of people think they have no real good reason. I think a significant minority of reform voters feel they have some cause, but conservatives are overwhelmingly hostile, as well as Labour. I think that would have been inevitable because the riots were kind of just in the main criminality, even if there are underlying causes, which many of us are worried about.
And to do this, Musk had to buy Twitter. He had to buy an established one, because every time there's been an attempt to create a kind of
it's a natural monopoly, anyway, right? All those people who say, I'm leaving this hell, and then people who say, it's hell site, I hate this place, and they've been going on about that for 10, 15 years. They never leave. Yeah. They can't leave. What else are they going to do?
What's happened to threads? I haven't really been...
I checked my threads the other day. My last thread tweet, whatever it was, 54 weeks ago, and it was actually that article about pit bulls, about bully XLs. So I haven't been very active. No, but I mean, there's is it Mastodon, Blue Sky? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a natural monopoly. So everyone's going to stick with the main one, I think.
Richard, you're a very successful X user. Do you use any other platforms, really? I'm only really aware of you using...
No. I gave Threads a try at the very beginning. Never went to Blue Sky or any of those. Yeah, Ed is right. It's a network effect. Everyone is there on Twitter. Twitter works really well. I mean, I just went to Parler or Gab or one of them to check out, and it's really, I mean, it's just a ghetto. I mean, the thing you pop up and it's like, here's who you follow, and it's all these sort of right-wing media personalities, all these people in the Trump sphere. It seems like, especially the Truth Social, I mean, that seems like a complete grift. I mean, the valuation is sort of ridiculous, and he's selling stocks on it. Yeah, it doesn't work. I mean, Twitter works. I mean, it's just actually, he fired a lot of the engineers. Maybe it doesn't work as well, but it works really well. I mean, it comes up on your phone. I mean, everyone is there, and he's willing to. And I think part of this is, I mean, they weren't profitable, I think, before Musk, and I think I'm pretty sure they're still not profitable. I mean, I think the financial situation has got worse. Elon Musk obviously has the money to, he's addicted to the platform. It's sort of a consumption thing for him. He even has said, sometimes, I do this because I want to say free speech. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be a major moneymaker for him, considering everything.
He's having
else.
A great time as well. He's loving it.
Yeah.
This is so it's enjoyment, and he thinks he's doing something good for the world. And I think this is how you get, I mean, and like, who's going to compete with that? Because they're not even making a profit, right? You got to make a profit. You got to sell ads. You got to sell subscriptions. They do that on X too, but it's just like, they're not a profit making entity. So he's kind of like a great philanthropist of sorts, kind of like those rich guys who would found a university or something. He's just taking over Twitter and letting people speak.
Which brings us back to Trump, actually, because, I mean, one of the big things about last night was that Trump seemed to be using Twitter again. I think since he was allowed back on, Musk let him back on within a month of taking over Twitter. I think he's done maybe 2 posts. He posted his mugshot when he in Fulton County jailhouse. And he then, yesterday, he was doing a lot of tweets to sort of to pump the interview up. And I think the obvious question, Richard, is do you think he will and do you think he should start using Twitter regularly from now on until November?
It's risky because it's like, a guy is like, I don't know, he's like, whenever you have one of those athletes and he retires for a few years and then he comes back, like, Michael Jordan. I mean, the first time he came back worked out pretty well. The second time with the Washington Wizards didn't work out that well. Everything has changed. He's gotten older. He's gotten rusty. And then the Twitter that, where Trump succeeded, where he really built his political career, that's not the Twitter that we have now. It was the Twitter was sort of fun because it was like all these mainstream people and then Trump was crazy and everyone's like, he's the craziest guy. Now he comes back to Twitter. He's going to seem normal. I mean, these neo-Nazis and these, crazy conspiracy theorists, like Trump is going to seem like the most boring. He's going to be CNN at this point if he goes back there. So I don't know. It's pretty risky. If we're late in the campaign and, he's down, maybe it's worth taking risks. If he's ahead, I would say, yeah, there's a big risk here.
What about you, Ed? Do you think, I mean, it makes sense. You're talking about the power of Twitter there. It makes sense for him. Musk's got 192 million followers. He's got about 90 million. It makes perfect sense for Trump to now, particularly with the polls tightening or even showing Harris ahead in some places. It would be a useful campaign thing for him to get back on Twitter.
It certainly helped him win in 2016. I mean, it would have been inconceivable without. Yeah. I agree with Richard that I think maybe it might not be the same.
Yeah,
the fun might have gone out of it now. He's not going to get the same. I don't think he'll be able to bait people quite the same way.
Do you ever read him on Truth Social?
I've never been there.
You've never been on Truth Social? Oh.
It's losers, right?
Just for the losers like me, yeah.
Yeah, I'm very status conscious.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a Twitter account that posts everything Trump posts on Truth Social, so you can basically follow him on Truth Social on Twitter. On second thought, I think that Freddie's right. I mean, I think the platform is too big. It might not be the same, but like if he has a narrative he wants to push, yeah, there's nothing like Twitter for getting it out there. So you probably should at least do some of it. It won't be the same, but whatever. I mean, he's trying to win an election, not preserve a Twitter legacy.
And Richard, I wanted to ask you just off Twitter and Musk for a bit, but just about the election, because we've discussed American politics and the state of America before. It does look as though the Harris campaign has the Trump campaign a little bit wrong-footed. They look a bit flat-footed anyway at the moment. How bad do you think things are for the Trump campaign? And do you think they're going to lose, I suppose, is the obvious question.
Yeah. So, every election with Trump we've had, this is the third one. They've been pretty much the same. Trump has been not very popular. The Democrat has also not been popular. And it's just, a sort of a horse race on that basis. With Biden, I mean, he was just in such bad shape that like Trump looked like he was going to win pretty convincingly. But now with Biden gone and then Kamala coming in, it's back to the 2016, 2020 kind of race. And I think that's actually since 2016 in particular, the Democrats have learned a lot. I mean, Hillary Hillary had a lot of unforced errors as far as leaning into wokeness, leaning into kind of these the mothers of the movement, the mothers of the young people who'd been shot, and the police brutality thing and wokeness, and she ran to the left of Bernie Sanders on this. And I think it got crazy over the next couple of years, and 2020 was crazy, although they nominated Biden, who really didn't speak like that or have that kind of feel. And now by 2024, I think they've achieved this kind of sort of electorally sort of optimal position where they can tap into youth energy. Oh, look, she's Kamala. She's young. She's not that young, but she seems young. She's, got the memes. Everyone cool likes her. All the young women, even the young men come out. They have this running mate, Tim Walz, who just seems like a normal American guy. They don't talk about intersectionality or anything. Their policies might not be all that different, but they don't talk about intersectionality. They don't really play up the woman thing. They don't play up the race thing too much. And so, they've really, I think, learned. And I think that's what's happening. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that the prediction markets have switched to Kamala being the favorite. I think that's probably right. And even, we're talking about 2016 comparisons after 8 years. I mean, demographic changes and the age of the Republican voters. I mean, it's not the same country that it was. It's almost a decade ago now. So, yeah, I would say for those reasons, Kamala's the favorite.
Ed, have you, like me, been surprised by, let's just talk about Brits, how quickly Brits have gone along with this idea that Kamala Harris, who, I talked to people a few weeks ago and they say, oh, well, Kamala Harris is obviously terrible. That's why Joe Biden can't go, because she's a disaster. And you talk to the same people now and they're suddenly incredibly excited by Kamala Harris. Have you been struck at how effective the Harris campaign and a lot of the media support behind her has been in just reinventing her as someone who's not woke, who's kind of a tough prosecutor and all that?
You mean, am I surprised by journalists being dishonest?
Yeah, I wasn't talking about journalists. I was talking about regular.
The same. I mean, she hasn't really been tested yet in the public. I mean, my impression of her from afar was that she seemed. I don't see any reason why that has changed. I mean, I get the impression most of the American media will obviously get behind anyone who they think will beat Trump. So it doesn't really matter who is. And, she's not a strong candidate. But then Biden wasn't a particularly strong candidate. They stuck with him until right at the end, really. Yeah. And Clinton wasn't a very strong candidate. I mean,
well, I wanted to end by asking you both about the weird thing, because as you've noticed, Ed, probably the Harris campaign seems to be getting a lot of traction, particularly online, with this sort of attempt to talk about the Republicans as weird.
Right. Yeah.
And the Republicans don't seem to be responding to it very effectively. And it seems to be working, and it ties into this very online, almost TikTok-y thing of vibes are all that matter. And if you can make someone seem weird, then it works. Do you think that is true? And I'll ask the same question to Richard after.
Well, I'm just going to repeat what I read Richard's going to say, which is that this seems to be, I mean, the Democrats, like the Labour Party, have a huge advantage amongst younger women, while the right tends to be male-dominated. And there is a feeling that right-wing guys tend to be a bit weird, and most young women, aren't attracted to them. Yes. And that, as a tactic, works because no one wants to seem weird.
And I think, as Richard has pointed out, men, if attractive women tend to be pro one side, men will soon switch their allegiances. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just as Ed says, right-wing guys. I mean, the thing about Vance is he's actually like something of an intellectual, and to be an intellectual right-wing guy, I think just, being intellectual is a little bit weird, but being right-wing is a little bit weird, especially the trans stuff. And then, you look at there's these stories about the people Vance follows online. He's into some very right-wing internet subcultures. And so people sense that. I mean, the abortion issue has been, the sort of albatross around the neck of the Republicans these last few years. He's not only, he's tried to moderate. I mean, he's said, basically leave it to states at this point. He said he's okay with the abortion pill. So he's tried to moderate in policy, but he's got these comments from the last 2-3 years, which sound, extreme on the topic. So I think these reasons are, I think these are reasons why it has hit pretty well. And then Walz is sort of the the antithesis of that. Walz is sort of, whatever you think about his policies, he just comes across as a middle school principal or something. So yeah, I mean the polling, this is not just vibes. This is not just us guessing, because we can look at polling of Walz's approval rating, which is like +10, and we can look at Vance, who's like -5 or -10 or something, which is actually pretty terrible. Vice presidents, at least they start out with positive approval rating. So yeah, I mean, we have some empirical data for sort of what the vibes are on Twitter, and yeah, it's another headwind against the Trump campaign.
You said there, Richard, that right-wing men tend to be weird about trans stuff. I mean, I think the obvious response to that is it's the trans stuff that is weird, and I think most people think that.
It's a reasonable response. At the same time, I mean, you follow 20 big right wing accounts and 20 left wing accounts and see who talks about trans more. So it's really no comparison. I mean, the liberals, I mean, can at least say, look, it's sort of an uncomfortable situation. This boxer, I mean, is it 2X, 2Y? I don't know. We want to have compassion. We want to have sympathy. They're not all day on Twitter saying, the trans have to go into women's sports. They're sort of, they can sort of outsource their opinions or like what they care about to these sort of left-wing institutions and these medical associations and these sports boards and so forth. I mean, you go to right-wing Twitter and it's just trans this, trans that, women's sports and that. And, most Americans do agree with the Republican or the conservative position on trans and women's sports. I have seen, a focus group data that, like, if you're running a campaign on that and you're making that number one issue, yeah, people do see that as a little.
Isn't it how much you care about something that is what makes you weird, though? They can have argument, oh, why do you even care about that? Yeah. If you're very, very focused on like the trans issue or something else, people will start to think, well, you're a bit.
Yeah. Well, because being passionate is weird, or being.
Because I think it's considered prestigious to sort of, oh, I don't care. Those things are beneath me. Obviously, this stuff is bad, but it's beneath me. I don't.
It's lame to be excited.
Yeah, it's lame to care about things like that.
Yeah,
something like that.
No, I don't. I think if you get up there and you're like, Biden ruined American living standard. We are much poorer, and we have to have this policy and that policy, inflation. You seem passionate about that because there's a consensus in society that like the economy is like a big issue that people vote on. Right?
You should care about.
I think being too obsessed with social issues. This is a problem for wokes, and this is a problem for people who are too anti-woke, right? DeSantis did a lot of things. Every single DeSantis proposal is on pretty much everyone on these social issues, not on abortion, but like on getting rid of, gender theory for third graders. Each one polls very, very well. I don't think DeSantis, even in a Republican primary, running as the guy who's just anti-woke as his core. I don't think that works well. I think that strikes people as sort of unusual or strange, or like, oh, why are you worried? Why are you so worried about this stuff, right? We agree with you, but like, why are you this passionate about it?
Well, on that very good and not at all weird point, I think we will end it. Thank you very much, Ed, for coming in. And thank you very much, Richard, for joining us down the line.